everyone. Welcome to the 367th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have an awesome show for you today. We're going to be talking about robots, specifically Amazon's Astro robot, a new user interface for the smart home. We've got some wearable news from Aura and Fitbit. We've got new air purifiers, too, that are worth mentioning, and smart label news from Avery Dennison. We're also getting a new product for plant parents, if you're interested in that. And we're going to talk about some smart dust and home assistant getting what is really a very large April update that's worth talking about. We're also going to hear from our guest this week, Dan Simmons, who is the CEO of Dwellwell, a company building a check engine light for the smart home that just raised $12 million. We'll also hear from a new advertiser this week. This week's advertiser is going to be Impinj. They'll be talking about Rain RFID. But first, let's hear from another one of our advertisers. This week's advertiser is Influx Data. Increasingly, time series data is all around us. It's in the cloud as applications and services scale out, and it is in the IoT as more and more devices come online. After all, sensor data is time series data. And that's where InfluxDB comes into play. InfluxDB is the open source time series platform made for developers to build real-time applications quickly and at scale. It's programmable and performant with a common API that gives you high granularity, high scale, and high availability. You can get started for free and learn more at www.influxdata.com. All right, Kevin, let's talk robots, specifically Astro, the really expensive. I believe it's going to eventually go for $1,500, but right now, if you meet Amazon's muster, you can get it for $1,000. I actually applied to buy this, I realized, because I had to answer all these questions. Yeah, they were like, does your home have stairs? And I was like, it does. And they asked a bunch of questions. And
I did not. And this is like in my wheelhouse.
It's a robot, and you love robots, but the first reviews seem to be out. The Wall Street Journal and CNET both got a 2-week trial with Astro, Amazon's latest robot. And Kevin, what do you think?
I think that I was correct in not requesting an invitation to purchase this, only because, it's a lot of money, whether it's $1,000 for early access or $1,500 at full price. When I heard that and I looked at what it can do and thought about what it can't do, I didn't feel it was a huge value add. So obviously I did not apply. And based on the reviews, I kind of feel justified in at least holding off.
Why is that? I look at it and I was like, well, it maps your house. It can map people's faces and it'll go find them and deliver things to them. Now you have to set things in its little carrying tray. Mm-hmm. So is that awesome? No.
Yeah, it's like an Echo Show on wheels with more smarts and that periscope camera so that I can see above counters and furniture. So from a security perspective, that might be a nice value add. But it's like a souped up little Vector that I have the Vector robot that kind of does the same thing. That works with Amazon and it has a camera. It doesn't have nearly the capabilities of the Astro, but I got Vector because it's neat. I can tinker with it and it's fun. And it also wasn't $1,000 or $1,500. I don't see that the value here is in that $1,000 to $1,500 price range, unless you want a roving security bot and you have younger children who like to watch videos on Amazon. You can set it up to just do that. The kids can play games on it on the touch screen.
You could tell it to find mom, and then it could go and find an elderly parent. The big value add is letting it roam around and find people or check in on things or follow people like young children to entertain them is kind of the takeaway I got from the reviews. Yeah,
that seems to be where it excels currently. And is that enough? For certain parents, it might be. My kids are older, and even though I still act like a kid, I don't think this is going to add a lot of value to my life. So it's not for me, but
Some of the use cases, like, checking a door lock. If you have a smart door lock, you can just check the app, right? You don't need to actually go send a little roving robot. If your house is smart, you may not need $1,000 roving robot to run around and do things for you.
No, but you just raised a thought in my head, because I've said many times, and I still believe this, that like we don't need more smart speakers in the house. There's too many. And if you have just one, in a sense, or, few, this one could rove around to where people are. So that way in any room, you can, not automate, but voice control things or check the status of things without using a phone. And it's almost like you have that smart speaker around you wherever you are.
I also think, though, it's probably kind of a pain in the butt. So both of the reviewers talked about, it being underfoot. And this bulky robot parks itself, it can park itself in a charging station, sure. Or it finds, a place where it feels like it's most helpful and stays there. Would I want this thing roaming around my house? No, it's too big.
See, I don't have a problem with the size. I don't know the exact size, but I would say it's maybe 1.5 feet tall, maybe 1.5 feet wide.
I just imagine like a Roomba, and granted, my house is a decent size. It's a suburban house. It's not like a small apartment in the city, but even so, just, having this robot parked in weird places around my house would drive me absolutely nuts. Because you don't necessarily know where it's going to be.
I mean, I don't know where my dog's going to be either, so I don't have a problem with that per se. Like any mobile robot in my home is going to take up space. So I don't have a problem with that. It just doesn't do enough for me.
Wall Street Journal, Joanna Stearns was like, maybe if it could vacuum.
Right. Yeah, it has no arms or any appendages. It's got, like you said, the little carry tray that you can, put a beverage in, or a small bowl with food or something. So, okay, there's some novelty and fun in that, but it's not something that my family would use on a regular basis. I mean, we're not that old or lazy that we have to like ask somebody to go to the fridge and get me a soda or something, right? I mean, it's always nice, but I don't need that. I mean, for people who can't get around the house and all, sure. If you've got somebody who's, mobility challenged, they could use this as a type of assistant that says, go to the kitchen so somebody can get me a drink and it'll bring it back. Sure.
Yeah, but that it seems like a person would do that just as well.
No doubt.
Yeah. I mean, because a person would have to be in the kitchen to get the beverage anyway.
This is very true. Because again, there's no appendage, there's no arm. It can't open the fridge. It can't grab a drink or anything like that. That is correct.
Yeah. So in most people, I mean, that seems to be the crux of the reviews. Like, I will note the CNET review mentioned that this robot doesn't listen as well as like a traditional Madam A device might. Basically, this seems like most people said it's kind of a solution in search of a problem. I will say, though, that the original Amazon Echo device, you felt the same way about it. I didn't. I thought it was pretty awesome. So,
oh, no. Yeah, I did not care for it until they added all the smart home stuff, right? It was just a speaker and, control music with it was like the big thing. But once they added the smart home stuff, I completely changed my mind. So maybe it's with this product or the next iteration of this product, certain things, certain value add features come about, or other options where maybe it does have like a grab arm that can pop up from a periscope and identify a soda and get it. Maybe. I know that's out there. I know. But I'm just thinking ahead what would make it more valuable to me. And this iteration doesn't do it, but some tweaks and or a second iteration with changes just might.
And you could think about accessories, like accessories that make its grabber arm able to open your fridge, for example. And if you think about the smart home, you had to have some smart home things to make Madam A interesting for that. So there is precedent for something like that, maybe? I don't know. All right. But today, most of us are probably not going to be buying this, and that's okay.
I'll stick with Vector.
There you go. Let's talk about some subtle news that I think actually might become really important. This is from 9 to 5 Google, and it's one of their posts where they look at kind of software and look at that and see what might be coming. And they looked at the Google app beta, the latest Google app beta, and they saw something that was referenced as look and talk. And in that, it says that you can look at the display from up to 5 feet away and talk to Google without having to say the hot word.
Right. The trigger event would be it recognizing your face. So you would need face match enabled for this to work. I don't know how many people do or don't. I know, pretty sure you had you had problems with Amazon's voice match.
I actually have problems with Google's voice match too.
Oh, okay.
Right now, they say this is only on the Nest Hub. It looks like the second generation Nest Hub. I'm not running this on my Nest Hub, but maybe I should try it. The reason we brought this up is because this is a big deal. You might not realize it, but gaze detection is one of those things that I've been excited about for certain devices because then you could just look at them and turn them on, like your personal assistant. I think it's probably less useful for a personal assistant, but imagine having a camera on like your stovetop and you could be looking at a burner and you could just say, turn the burner on, and it would turn the correct one on. Or you're looking at a light and it would figure out what you're looking at and you would turn that on. So I think there's some really cool options coming here, but I don't know. What do you think, Kevin?
Anything that reduces the barrier of complexity for using a smart device, I think, is a good thing in general. And having to say the wake word all the time for all these devices is more complex than it needs to be. It is. It's very tedious, right? And it's not something I enjoy doing. So I'm looking forward to this coming to the Google device and other devices, that you pointed out it could come to over time. Again, it's still an app beta. There's even a video that 9 to 5 has from a Google dog fooder, and that basically means a Google employee who's doing testing. I'm sure this is legit. It's showing in the video and it's in the actual decompiled application. So it's just a question of tuning and then timing of a release if Google decides to go forward with it.
I hope they do. I would like to see this in action. I would like to play with this in the real world. All right. Let's talk about when a product meets the real world, does really well, and then fails. We are talking about Pebble. And the founder of Pebble actually penned a blog post this week. I don't know when he actually wrote it, but he put it up on Medium, and it's a really long look at why Pebble failed. If you don't remember the Pebble, it was a smartwatch. It was actually one of the first smartwatches out there. It launched on Kickstarter, raised a lot of money. I used to have a Pebble. Did you have a Pebble, Kevin?
I did. I've had 2 different ones. Yeah. And it was at one time the largest funding ever on Kickstarter. It was over $10 million back in 2012.
Yeah. They built this thing. It went out. They sold 2 million Pebbles and did over 230 million in sales. And then in 2016, they basically sold to Fitbit, and it was a forced sale. They didn't succeed.
That wasn't the plan. Yeah.
That was not what they were going for. And the post is really interesting because it talks very much so about, hey, we had this great idea. We built it for us and we found an audience for it. And then we kind of went away from that audience, chasing some unarticulated demand. And I think that was probably the unarticulated demand was probably worth noting. And they didn't have marketing focus. And that basically they missed their forecasts. They built forecasts around this new device that they were going to launch that apparently no one was really that interested in, or they couldn't find a market for. And then they had a lot of inventory and ran into a cash crunch and then had to sell to Fitbit.
Yeah, and there's a good discussion on when they ran into problems, they didn't have a long-term vision well-defined to stick to, right? So they came up with problems and then didn't really know what to do. And you don't have a lot of time to replan your long-term vision when you're in a cash crunch and you've got inventory sitting in warehouses, effectively costing you money. So it's interesting. I just realized he wrote this in 2017, but only just published it because it's now been the 10-year anniversary of Pebble. So all these insights are fresh from when they had to sell. And it's a really good look into the mind of the Pebble CEO as this happened.
Yeah. And it's a nice bit of that point in time. He talks about the Apple Watch marketing and where that happened and getting the Apple smartwatch to position itself in the right market as well. So It's both a time capsule of smartwatches and a good case study for any entrepreneur who's like, oh, how am I going to build hardware that works?
And hardware that people want.
Yeah. I mean, in 2 million smartwatches, that's a big deal. That was a lot. And to contrast that, we actually have Aura, which just raised more money for its smart rings. So the Aura ring is a very popular it's an activity tracker, temperature tracker, health tracker kind of ring that you wear all the time. And they've actually just announced like a month ago, maybe a little less than a month ago, that they surpassed 1 million rings sold. And I'm not going to knock that, but contrast that with Pebble, which was riding high, selling 2 million at the beginning of the wearables craze. Like this was super early on. And then basically getting bought for parts by Fitbit. I mean, I think there's still you can run a Pebble screen basically on your Fitbit if you want, but probably most people don't.
No. And what's interesting here, going back to that long-term vision, the newest Aura ring, the Gen 3, has a few more sensors. So it's their latest ring. And in fact, they say more Gen 3 rings have sold than all previous versions combined. And they've got a focus, right? So as you said, the ring does heart rate monitoring, temperature tracking, etc., sleep, guided meditation, through an app, I presume. Later this year, what are they doing? They're adding features that continue that focus with workout heart rate monitoring, blood oxygen sensing, and sleep staging algorithms. So the path is clear, whereas with Pebble, I think they were still finding their way.
They wanted to make a smartwatch, not an activity or a fitness tracker. And I will say most of the market has gone towards the fitness tracker. I mean, Apple's doing health, Fitbit's doing health. They just actually said that the FDA has approved Fitbit for detecting AFib. And now, the Apple Watch actually has had that for a while, but Fitbit now has it. And so it's very much wearables for health as opposed to like getting notifications about your Bitcoin value. So I don't know, Kevin, what do you think? Because I'm very pro health tracking with a wearable and very not pro, I don't get my email on my watch, for example, or text.
Right. So I'm probably the opposite of you in some regards. The health tracking stuff is very important to me. And to me, that's table stakes on any wearable, right? If anything I'm going to buy, I've got to have at least a certain set of sensors and algorithms that can track my health data. And I have that today. I use an Apple Watch. I've tried various things, but I always come back to the Apple Watch. But I also do have certain apps or integrations on my watch. No, I don't want my email. I want things that are immediate and contextual to me. So I don't really care about email because email can wait. But you and I chat during the week through either Google Chat or some other chat app. I get notifications on that on my watch because those are more immediate. And I do reply to you by voice on there, and it goes through my phone back to you. So certain notifications I want and certain features, like there are things in my smart home that I control with the watch, either by voice or using the interface on the watch. So like I might want to adjust the volume of the speaker in my office and I don't want to pull out my phone or shout out, hey, Siri, do this. I just go into the app real quick and turn the digital crown and it just reduces the volume. So I use the watch for more smarts as well as health. But again, health to me is table stakes.
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for the definitive Google Watch to
Aren't we all?
This. I know. I'm like, yeah, we'll see. Okay, enough about wearables. Let's talk about smart tags. I'm only mentioning this because in the newsletter last week, I did a whole thing about how like the battery-free revolution is coming. Finally, we're getting to a point where energy harvesting chips and devices are actually good and being implemented at wide scale. And one of those companies that is providing that is a company called Wiliot. And they make these pixel tags that provide computing and sensors and radios that are all powered via harvested energy. And Avery Dennison, I found this random article in a Brazilian newspaper that they've opened a new factory in Brazil And that particular factory is going to be making Wiliot tags, which is pretty cool because it's kind of like RFID on steroids. So very fun. And they mentioned in the article that with the Wiliot tag, you can see the glass with the labels that allow you to check the temperature and the quantity of the drink inside, which is pretty neat, right? Like historically, RFID has been used to be like tracking inventory. So it's kind of like a fancier barcode, but now you're actually able to check the state of something with something like the Wiliot tags. So I think that's going to be really powerful for tracking food, tracking drugs, tracking all kinds of stuff. So thought it was worth a mention. Another thing worth a mention for like the super nerdy people out there, y'all know that I love plants and I have tried a bunch of gadgets tied to making my plants grow better. And now there is a new one that I found on Kickstarter. This is the Cura. And I don't know if I'm saying that. Maybe it's Cura. It's Cura. And it is a circular LED grow lamp that you place above a plant. There's also a water pump. And when you say to the app that controls this light, what kind of plant is underneath, it's going to make the lights work for that style of plant and water it appropriately. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's actually not too expensive either compared to other grow lights. I know you and I spoke before the show about some smart grow lights that you have looked at or purchased in the past. And I think you spent, like over $200?
I bought some Aspect lights from a company called Soltech. It's actually somewhere I think it's in Pennsylvania. It is in Pennsylvania. I can't remember if it's Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. Like the lights I bought were $150 per light, but they were fancy and they're like sconces in my living room that are also Astro lights. The Cura so they come in 200, 300, and 400 millimeters, which is about roughly 8 inches to 15 inches wide. And they're just big circles that hang above your plant. There's a floor version. There's a pendant version. I don't know. I might pick this up. It's not crazy expensive either. I think the biggest version is it $89?
Yeah, the pledge, again, this is a Kickstarter, so the pledge to get one of the larger ones earlier is $89.
And you don't get it, though, until December 2022. We'll just mention that.
Yeah. If you want the smaller ones, it's $49. The medium size is $69. All of these prices are about half of what they expect the MSRP to be. Keep that in mind. If this is something for you, you probably want to do it now. We can't speak to how good the product is or anything because it's not available yet. But, if you're a risk taker.
Yeah, it's the guys who did Altafarm, which was a smart growing system, basically. So they have a history with plants and lights.
Yeah, a good history.
Yeah. So, if you've got plants in your house, maybe you also want some air purifiers to, suck up the fungal gnats. No, that's not what they do. But maybe you're interested in your overall health. And there are 2 air purifiers on the market worth looking at. One is from everybody's favorite rebadger of Chinese electronics, Wise. They have a brand new air purifier that Kevin, you actually said looked pretty good.
Yeah, I know I just reviewed their gun safe last week and said, it's like the least impressive Wise product to me ever. But the air purifier looks impressive. It's $129.99. That is a sale price, which is typical Wise. They mark down from the official MSRP at launch. It'll be $170 at full price. It's apparently sold out right now. It is a smart air purifier. It can it can clean a 500 square foot room over 3 times in an hour. So that's good to me. It's got a HEPA filter, although there's actually 2 additional filter options. If you want to add on, you can get a formaldehyde filter to get rid of common pollutants and a wildfire filter, which for the folks like where you are with the wildfire, Stacey, that's something of interest maybe.
Yeah, although I feel like any air purifier should have that, so I'm not sure if that's just marketing or what.
Well, it would be nice to have on every air purifier, but I think that's more of a regional targeted thing, and it's going to require a certain filter to really scrub that air. So I can see why it's an option. It's got a laser particle sensor that will adjust the air filter, the purification. It can measure up to zero point 0.3 microns. And it's got smart control, so it is connected. It does work with Madam A and does work with Google, so there's integrations there, which I can't say about that gun safe. So, for the price and for what it seems to offer, I think it's reasonable.
There we go. And then there's another option, and this is an option from a company called SmartMe. And this air purifier I mentioned, it's the SmartMe Air Purifier 2. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because it's one of the first ones I've seen out there that has a UV filter. UV sanitizes virus particles. So a lot of these air purifiers come out and they're dealing with particulate matter, which is great, but they can't make any promises about like cleaning the actual air. But with the UV inside, they can say that they're actually killing virus particles. And that's why this one is particularly notable, I guess. And this one is priced at $260, which is frankly very cheap. It also moves quite a large volume of air. It works in like a 480 square foot room, which I have a filter from Airmega, Koei Airmega, and that thing was like $450 or $500. And it's smart. So it'll detect when the air gets bad and then it turns itself on and that sort of thing. I'm like, it's pretty good. It looks compelling. There's only one review right now on Amazon. We haven't reviewed it and it says it's terrible. So
who knows?
Yeah. One review. I don't know. The other SmartMe purifiers do get decent reviews, although it does seem that their HomeKit integration may be a little buggy. So,
yeah, what I like about the newest one also is that it's got sensors to measure particulate matter and other contaminants in there. I've seen a lot of smart devices that do that by themselves, but aren't an air purifier, but they can connect to an air purifier or integrate with it. In fact, I'm testing one right now from AirThings, and that unit alone is $199, and all it does is monitor those types of things, right? So this is all built in and purifies the air.
Yeah. So if you're in the market for an air purifier, and I think more and more people are every day, these are two pretty good options, it looks like. I've also tested a bunch of options, and most of them are pretty on par. Like, honestly, the Airmega, the Koei Airmega is my favorite so far. And I don't even really care about the app. I do like having the detection and the purification in one device, personally. Although you could make the case that that's not awesome because detection sensors can wear out over time, whereas the actual purification may not need to. Okay, let's talk about a startup out there that's doing something a little interesting. It's Moeco, maybe? Moeso? I have no idea. It's Moeco. They announced a new tracker. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because this particular tracker, it supports 4G and 5G cellular networks, but it's made with sustainability in mind. So the idea is actually that you could throw this away or recycle it. It only has 2 grams of lithium in it for the battery, and you can also dispose of it as plastic waste. Hopefully you can recycle it. And then finally, it's only $14.
Yeah, that's relatively inexpensive for like a logistics kind of tracking device. Plus, you've got your cellular connectivity as opposed to relying on either Bluetooth or some other radio technology.
Yeah, and there's plenty of two-way reusable trackers that you track something and then you send it back and then you recharge it and then you track something else. I've talked to actually bunches of companies that do this. The argument here is that if you ignore the sending it back step and you can just throw it out, that saves transport of the particular device. I don't know. I mean, any of these are going to have some sort of battery, some sort of electronic component that needs to be ultimately recycled. But I like the way they're thinking about this. So I'm hoping to talk to them and get a little bit more information. Now, let's talk about Home Assistant, because it has a really big new release, and it's been a year since Kevin played with it, and he checked this out and came to some conclusions.
Yeah, when I went back and read my Home Assistant review the last time I looked at it, I looked at the interface picture that I put in that post, and it's hideous compared to what Home Assistant looks like now. It looks so much better. And not only that, it's so much easier to use because of the interface improvements and many, many more improvements. In fact, there are 20 major feature updates in the latest release of Home Assistant. It's a big, big update. And I went through basically an installation from scratch on a Raspberry Pi 3. And again, I went back to my original and I struggled with the installation. This time around, oh my gosh, so much easier, so much faster. Basically, I didn't even have to download the Home Assistant software manually. The process basically uses a link to GitHub where the software repository is for Home Assistant. So you're always getting the latest software update when you use this new process. You literally get the software onto an SD card, micro SD card, I should say, pop it in your Pi, put power and an Ethernet cable in the Pi, and let it do its thing. It just self-installs, self-configures, and within a few minutes, I had Home Assistant in my web-based dashboard on another PC. It discovered devices automatically. Obviously, it's not going to set up automations and things, but there are so many features that now make it a lot easier to manage your devices and automate your devices. One big new feature is groups. You can group like devices into any single group you'd like. So I did that with all my lights, for example. And I now have a nice little toggle on my dashboard for all lights. You can do that with fans or speakers or any other like device you would like, which is really handy. When you're setting up automations, you can test conditions, which is really cool because when I'm setting up automations, I'm like, I think I know what the condition is for the automation to run or whatever, but I don't know until it actually runs. And in my household, if it doesn't run properly, I hear about it from my family. So I can test this during the setup process.
Yeah, testing is so important. You think you want something to happen and you're like, this is going to do it. And then you test it out and you're like, oh, no, that was terrible.
I've had quite a few of those moments in my house. Yes, it's not my finer moments by far. This one is huge, I think. The fact that Home Assistant now knows when your device, any connected device, has a firmware update available, and it will update for you within Home Assistant. You don't have to go to the mobile app, say for a Hue firmware update. It just does it for you. Oh, again, it's keeping the user experience more seamless and simple and more automated for you, which is fantastic. There's a couple other things like some new updated controls and to make it easier to set things up. Like there was never an RGB color selector where, if you know what I'm talking about, like where you can pick and choose from a color palette for, say, your lights. You couldn't do that before. Now you've got a basic RGB selector like most modern apps do these days. Zones got an improvement, and I never used zones, even though I thought it could be powerful. Setting up a zone in my house to see if people were in the zone or not in the zone, it really never did anything for me, but now it actually can track if people are in a zone, keeps the history of that. You can set automations for those zones, or you can say, don't fire off this automation to turn these lights on if nobody's in the zone where the darkness is. I don't know what else to say. It's just like, it's got actually a nice functionality now. So there's 20 different features, but the setup process is better. The groups are nice. The testing of conditions for automations is nice. I could talk for probably an hour about the 20 new features, but suffice it to say, so I won't. You're correct. I won't. Here's what I will say. If you've never used Home Assistant because it just seemed too techy, too complex, too unapproachable, I think now is a good time to test it. There are still some things where you might have to go into a file and manually change something in a text editor, but they are working so hard to get rid of that and do it all through the user interface in a way that's, again, approachable and easier to understand and intuitive. I would say go take a look at Home Assistant. It's free and open source. However, you do need hardware like a Raspberry Pi 3 or 4. I know those are hard to come by. There are other devices, though, that run it, like the Firewalla, the newest Firewalla. You can run a Docker container, and that Docker container can be Home Assistant on it. So there are other options.
Yeah. Basically, check it out. I'm even considering it, but, maybe. I'm almost there, Kevin. Okay, now it is time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline, the section of the show where we hear from you, our listeners. And this week, I just have to tell you, if you want to sponsor the IoT podcast hotline, send an email to Andrew at stacyoniot.com because we are looking for sponsors. This is a good ad package, especially if you have a product that you'd like our audience to receive as a giveaway item. So this month's giveaway is actually a review unit from the Nest doorbell. So you get that, and hopefully you will gently used, attached to my wall with wires and duct tape. Yay! Okay. So give us a call at 512-623-7424 if you'd like to be entered to win. And this week we actually are taking a question from email, which I know we don't often do, but this was such a good question. We thought we'd answer it. So it's from Matt Frazier. And Kevin, why don't you read this email?
Matt says, "Hi, Stacey and Kevin, longtime listener, first-time question asker, but I've backed myself into a corner that I think there should be an easy solution to, but I just can't find it. The lighting at my house is controlled mainly with a combination of SmartThings, several Echo devices, GE Z-Wave in-wall switches and dimmers, Philips Hue hub and bulbs for lamps, and a Jasco Z-Wave outdoor smart plug. While most of this is automated, there are times, like when my dog decides he needs to go outside in the middle of the night, that I need to control the living room lights, which are Hue, and backyard lights, which are done by Jasco, manually, and I don't want to have to argue with Madam A. I've tried Echo buttons, but they're big and ugly and single function. They don't work well for an on-off scenario. I have one outside my bedroom as I turn off all the lights now, and it works for that. I tried a SmartThings button, but it seemed out of place, and the battery died quickly. Is there a button or on-off switch that I can use that doesn't hook up to mains power?"
Yes.
The short answer is yes.
We found actual light switches, if that's your jam. Parameters we're working with is you've got two things. You've got Z-Wave in-wall switches, and then you've got Philips Hue, which are Zigbee. And then you have another Z-Wave outdoor device that you're trying to bring together. So this means you need something that was going to control Z-Wave and Zigbee, which means you're going to have to use your SmartThings, because that is the best way to group all these things together.
Right, because Matt does not want another hub. He said that in the email that I didn't mention, but yes.
Some things to think about. First up, I thought, hey, AOTech, which makes the new SmartThings hub, makes a wall moat, which is a 4-button Z-Wave controlled device that would actually, you could bring all this stuff together in that. And it's pretty. I'm not sure what you meant by out of place. So this would not, I don't think, would look out of place on a wall. But there's also an option if you want to just do a traditional looking light switch that controls everything. There's something for that too. Which one is it, Kevin?
It's the Go Control Z-Wave Plus Scene Controller. So it just literally looks like a wall switch with 2 buttons, and it's $16.
Yeah. So yeah, the wall moat, by the way, is very expensive. It's like $60. Not very expensive, but not $16. So I'm going to recommend those two for you. You're still going to have to go in there, create the routine, group all your lights that you want turned on. The wall moat gives you a lot of options, actually, because it's got 4 buttons. But if you just want the single button, $16 might get you there. I can't speak to the battery life of that particular product, but hopefully it would be good because it's Z-Wave.
It's actually USB rechargeable, so that's pretty handy.
That is handy. So you could just, well, maybe it's handy. I don't know how you feel about recharging things. I get a little irritated by it, but yes, theoretically it's handy. So yeah, let us know what you choose. Remember, if you would like to give us a call at 512-623-7424 and ask us a question, you will be entered to win a Nest doorbell. Yay! So give us a call. That concludes this segment of the show, but please stay tuned for a message from our sponsor and for our guest, Dan Simmons, who is the CEO of Dwell Well, talking about the $12 million raise the company just had and what the heck they're doing. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Impinj, and I have Galen Meyer, who is here with us from the company. Hello, Galen. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
All right. So first up, tell us about Impinj.
Well, some people define the Internet of Things as a network of powered electronic devices. Impinj expands the Internet of Things to include literally everything. I'm talking about things like a suitcase that you check in at the airport, the running shoes you order online for in-store pickup, or medication that needs to be kept at a specific temperature. The Impinj platform lays a foundation for developing IoT solutions that connect physical items to the cloud. Using Rain RFID, the Impinj platform delivers the identity, location, and authenticity about everything a business needs to manage. Rain RFID is a global standard that provides a unique identifier for any item. And Impinj invents and builds Rain RFID products like the tiny chips that power a Rain RFID tag, the readers that wirelessly identify tagged items, and software like algorithms and APIs that are used to build and operate Rain RFID solutions. We work with a global ecosystem of partners who innovate and deploy complete solutions used across a range of industries, like the retail industry, who use solutions built by Impinj partners for inventory management, loss prevention, self-checkout, and other kinds of store operations applications. Shipping and logistics solutions that track packages and pallets as they move in and out of distribution centers, on and off trucks, and wirelessly update systems that track and forecast shipment arrivals. And then healthcare systems that track the location, status, and supply of medical tools and equipment so that hospitals can treat patients and operate efficiently.
Got it. All right. So I've heard of RFID, but what is RAIN RFID?
Well, that's a great question. RFID, or radio frequency identification, is a broad category of wireless communications using radio waves to identify and locate tagged items. You can think of RFID tags as super tiny radios and different types of RFID as the different radio frequencies like shortwave or FM radio. Most people have heard of NFC. These are the chips that are in credit cards. NFC stands for near field communication, and it's a type of RFID that responds at very close range, one tag at a time. RAIN RFID is different. It can identify and locate many items quickly, up to 1,000 items per second. It can read items in a range of between a few centimeters to several meters, and it can identify items without direct line of sight. The capabilities of RAIN RFID, combined with the low cost of RAIN RFID tags, make it the ideal technology for large-scale IoT systems that connect thousands, millions, or even billions of things.
Awesome. So how would someone learn more about Impinj?
You can visit our website at www.impinj.com. That's IMPINJ. And take a look at our blog. There you'll find stories about how Impinj, together with our partners, is connecting everything to the IoT.
Hey everyone, we are back with the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Dan Simmons, who is the co-founder and CEO of Dwellwell. Hello, Dan. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Stacey.
Oh, I am really excited because first off, this is a new product. Second off, it's for multifamily. And third off, it's actually really interesting. So let's just kick it off by having you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Dwellwell.
Well, I'm going to start a little bit, just adjust your opening a bit. What this is actually a product to really transform the maintenance process for all of residential homes. So although our first customer is a multifamily customer, we don't expect to stop there. In a sense, what Dwellwell is we're a SaaS company that transforms maintenance with data. Essentially, we're thinking about this in a really radical way, about revolutionizing the maintenance process. The idea came about 6 years ago. I have a house, a second home on the eastern shore of Maryland. I had a couple of frozen pipes. The pipes thawed, and the house flooded and actually was largely destroyed. After a year or so, we put the house back together again, and I thought to myself, I'm a technologist, right? I was running a company called Hillcrest, which was an expert in sensors. And I made an interesting observation that there are 100 million cars on the road, and all of them have a check engine light. And there are 130 million homes in the US, and none of them have a check engine light. And so why don't we actually create this idea of a check engine light? So at the time, this is 6 years ago, no one was really thinking about this. There were no, no IoT products focused on maintenance. And we really saw a need there that was significant. We actually made a decision that we would focus on people who had essentially homes they didn't live in. And that ultimately led to really a significant rethinking about our market strategy.
Sure. So this is what got you to multifamily, because the people who live in the homes are not the owners and they may not care about the overall maintenance of the home. Yes?
Correct. What we were looking to do is build a product that would transform maintenance. If you think about successful startups over the last 20 to 30 years, Many of those startups succeeded by digitizing what were formerly manual processes. And today, maintenance in homes is almost the most manual of processes, with really almost no technology applied to it. And it's entirely reactive. Something breaks and we fix it. And often is that something breaks and we fix it, and then it's still broken and we try to fix it again. And we saw an opportunity to digitize this process, to bring data to the maintenance process in order to really improve the efficiency. And so who has the problem at scale? Well, in the US, there are 31 million apartments, right? And so clearly that's a significant opportunity. Those are people who own homes they don't live in, and they have that problem at scale. There's another category, the single family rental market. These are REITs that also own homes they don't live in, and they also have this problem at scale. Interestingly, the SFRs have another layer of problem, and that problem is that their homes are scattered. And so, with an apartment building that maybe has 100 to 200 apartments, well, those are all in the same location. And so, you might assume, well, it's reasonably efficient to do that maintenance, but it actually is challenging. It has its challenges. But if you have the 100 to 200 homes scattered throughout a community, that problem is even greater. And so we saw these two markets, the multifamily market and the single family rental market, as really excellent target customers for us as we kick off this product launch.
That's great, because I will say, like, not this year, but last year, one of my big projects was actually to implement some of these check engine light products in my house. I spent on an electricity monitoring setup. I spent, $130 on a smart thing for my water heater. I bought a Fin water leak detection system. I ultimately decided that it was so much money. I probably spent, maybe $900, $1,000 out of pocket for the devices. And then some of them had ongoing service contracts associated with them. And it just felt like it was just too much. And ultimately, these were the kind of devices you buy and you're supposed to forget about them unless something's wrong, right?
Right.
And it's a lot of money to spend on something that you're supposed to forget about and you don't see any, I'll say, everyday kind of value from. So I think it's probably a smart strategy to amortize those investments and costs across a wider market, and put it where like people really value this, because a REIT is going to be much more invested in something like this and hopefully can lower the capital costs going in.
Well, I'd love to comment on some of the things you just said, because you just brought up some really important points that are critical to our story. The first thing, when we conceived of this idea, we thought about it. We had expertise from our prior, professional activities, but we started to see companies put their toe in the water. One of the first products that was reasonably successful was a competitor to Fin. The product that you bought was Flow, which is now owned by Moen. But we saw these as siloed solutions. And matter of fact, today, if you look across all of the sensing required to really understand the whole home, you have, and you mentioned some of them, you have water, you have electricity, you have HVAC, you even have monitoring of appliances, you have indoor air quality. In some cases, for the rental community, you have noise monitoring. So you have all of these sensing capabilities, and there are many companies that provide solutions in maybe one, two, at most three of these silos. And those solutions are often over-engineered and over-siloed, right? So it requires the owner of the home, in this case for you individually, or in particular, if you think about a multifamily or a single family rental REIT, they have to cobble together these multiple solutions in order to really monitor and understand the entire house. This is a problem. This is never going to scale. And so when we conceived of Dwell Well, we wanted it to be a holistic solution. And that was a very big difference. And so we wanted to also make sure that it was economically viable. And so packaging multiple sensors together in an optimized way enabled us to bring the cost down while increasing the functionality.
Okay. And so tell me how all this works together.
Yeah. To start, we are developing a core technology called ambient inference. And ambient inference is really, it's our secret sauce. In many ways, it's our AI. And so the way we actually imagine this is, as I said, how do you do a solution that is bumper to bumper? Well, one way is you could instrument every system in the home, right? So I could put a sensor on the hot water heater, as you suggested earlier. I could put a sensor in the HVAC, in the furnace, in the compressor, on the refrigerator, in the stove. I could actually instrument everything, and that would be completely cost prohibitive. And it doesn't actually do the job because you don't know what sensor you need. Do you need to monitor the electrical performance? Do you need to monitor the thermal performance, the vibrations, the temperature, the humidity? What are you monitoring? So what we realized is if we create a general purpose sensor, what we actually did initially was something really interesting. We wrote down for our first year a list of hundreds of things that could go wrong in a residential home or building. Literally, that list got to be almost 500 items long. And then we said to ourselves, okay, if we want to sense those things, how would we go about doing it? What kind of sensor would we use? And one of the most important components of our solution was we didn't want to require professional installation. So, unlike some of the products out there, we didn't want to cut pipes. We wanted to actually be able to monitor the environment of the home, the ambient environment, and then identify anomalies in that environment that signal something is going wrong. And so we wrote a list of sensors that would actually allow us to do that. And then we went out and spoke to dozens and dozens of customers and asked them what was important. And ultimately, that helped us prioritize which sensors should go in our device and which sensors wouldn't be appropriate, at least our first generation. And that's what led to the creation of our device, which we call our D node. We basically deploy these D nodes, roughly one for every 300 square foot in a home. The D node contains about a dozen different sensors. It can monitor the electrical system. It can monitor many of the environmental signals in a home. And then we use all that data. We collect all of that information and we feed it to a unique AI system. It's a multi-layer AI system. It has statistical analysis. So we have physics models that we use. It uses machine learning in order to identify when a particular appliance or plumbing fixture is being used. And it has deep learning. It actually has really a true neural network system that we custom design to identify failures in equipment.
And how important for developing your AIs was owning your own sensor and building your own sensors?
It was very important. When we started this business, we actually looked out and said what sensors would be necessary in order to do this. But in order to do the kind of AI we're doing, the kind of sensor fusion we're doing, we need to have our sensor data both spatially co-located. So they need to be in the same place so that they could be compared directly across one another. And then they need to be synchronized in time. When we take a measurement, we need to know that the measurement from the vibration sensor or from the electrical sensor happened at the exact same time. And if the devices are spatially separate and come potentially from different companies, it's very hard to actually to do that with high accuracy. And we also had very specific sensor needs that we wanted to apply to this problem. So it was really important for us to build our own sensor. But we are still, as I indicated that we are a SaaS company. So the most important part of what we're delivering is a service. But you could think of us as a SaaS company that ingests its own data.
Well, and a lot of times I see SaaS as being the right model, especially for deployments in like office buildings or across multifamily dwelling units, simply because you've got dedicated hardware that you've built specific algorithms to run for. And as that changes or becomes obsolete, you're going to want to change that out and you're going to want to ultimately be responsible for it. So I assume that's one of the reasons why you did this model. But talk to me about the pricing and how you plan to kind of pull all this together for your customers?
Yeah, I'll touch on one point that you just made because I think it's a very important one. If you're building an algorithm, the AI algorithm is assuming a type of data stream. And for your audience, many of them are very familiar with AI, but neural network algorithms require training. And therefore, they actually expect the data to arrive in a particular form. If we didn't have control over the sensor, we would have a harder time training those AI. And many of the IoT systems that are out there today, many of the maintenance products, they may have a single function, let's say monitoring the water flow. And so they are able to connect that sensor to their algorithms. But for us, because we're looking at the whole home, it was really important to have that connection between the service platform, the AI, and the device itself. In terms of the pricing, because we are an early stage company, we are just now in pilots with our customers. We are actually not advertising our pricing actively. But suffice to say, and you actually earlier mentioned a price to outfit your home with a limited set of sensors, electricity monitoring, water heat, water, etc., in the $900 to $1,000 range. The best thing I could do today is say that we're very competitive to that price for our customers, and yet we're able to deliver this holistic platform. So, and I will be very specific because our business model is very straightforward. We charge a certain number of dollars per 1,000 square feet.
Anytime we stick a sensor or any sort of smart home device in a place where other people are going to live, not the owners themselves, we have to think about issues like privacy. So how do y'all handle the issue of who knows what and when if it's occupied?
We are very thoughtful about how we handle this issue. To start with, our AI is actually at the edge. So we are essentially associating our analytics with a given home. So our hub is doing edge AI processing. We do deliver some data to the cloud, the telemetry data, so that it could be graphed and it could be delivered to the customers through our user interface. But any of the analytics, essentially assessment of what's going on, stays local to the home. The other thing is with respect to our commercial customers, we do not associate any PII, any personally identifiable information with our service. So in particular, for example, our acoustic system is radically different than the acoustic system in, say, a smart speaker like an Alexa or Google Home. To us, voice is actually noise. We don't want to hear it. We don't actually capture. We do not record any data. We process it in real time, and that actually helps us maintain privacy. And so we keep most of the data locally. We do not attach PII, any personally identifiable data, to our analytics that we are identifying, to the insights. They're really focused, for us, we're focused on the building, what's happening in the building, and providing the maintenance teams information about specifically what they want to know about each unit or each home.
And before we go, I should ask you, how are y'all thinking about the Matter protocol, the interoperability protocol that should be coming out later this year?
Yeah, it's an important question. It's something that we spend a lot of time with. Matter, obviously, the Connectivity Standards Alliance really created the Matter protocol with one important point in mind, which was to allow interoperability between the typical IoT devices that are being placed into smart homes and the service platforms, essentially the software platforms that are really driving a lot of those services. And one of the ideas, obviously, is if you've got a digital lock, or you have a digital thermostat, or you have a water leak detector, you might want to know that those various devices are going to work across these various platforms. You don't want to necessarily buy a whole set of devices that work with one platform and then change to a different platform and then find that none of them work. Or you might actually have two platforms working side by side for one reason or another, and you might want cross connectivity. So Matter was a standard that was intending to really bring all of those capabilities together. However, there's an interesting difference. In a sense, what Matter would allow the industry to do is segregate the hardware devices, the IoT devices, from the software platforms. Essentially, let the hardware companies focus on doing the best job at making their hardware without having to worry about all of the other issues associated with bringing a device online, whether it's configuring the communications protocols, essentially onboarding a new device, or security protocols, right? And keeping data private. So the whole idea was to create this ecosystem of interoperability. We are doing something radically different. In a sense, we are building an AI, a platform, a software platform. We happen to also be building a unique piece of hardware, a unique sensor device. But those two, as I said earlier, have to work together. And so, although we're watching Matter carefully, we see Matter as currently focusing more on the automation of the home, essentially the state of the home, and controlling various services within the smart home ecosystem, but focusing on less on the holistic maintenance. And so to us, because we're building a holistic maintenance service and the hardware to go with it, we are effectively providing a vertically integrated solution. Now, there's always this question about, can you remain an island? And the answer is no. And so the reason we're watching Matter carefully is there will be specialty sensors that are not part of our D node that we will want to integrate. There will be outcomes. So we will want to deliver insights to our users through some of the automation services, through smart services. And so we will both want to ingest data over time from specialty devices, and we will want to continue to integrate more services into our platform, and then also deliver the insights on an outbound basis to these other smart home services. So Matter is going to help us do that, but we want to get the product really fully operational before we complicate it with an additional layer of integration in interoperability testing.
Got it. Okay. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm really pleased to have had you.
Well, thank you very much, Stacy.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening, and please subscribe.